Hey everybody, Coach Drew here. I am so glad you are joining me today. We'll be talking with a friend of mine, a mentor of mine, somebody who's well respected in the community. His name is Dr. Vidoll Regisford. He is a practicing psychotherapist. He is one of the most intelligent men that I know. He's so articulate, but he's not just brain smart, he's heart smart too. And he serves in the community in a number of capacities. He does group sessions with men. He's working with me and a number of other gentlemen in the Mental Health Men Summit. Those are some events that we put on in the community. But he also does critical incident debriefing for this province and beyond. So when there are disasters that strike, he is there to serve and to help people to manage. So we're going to be getting into men and our emotions, and particularly vulnerability. And I think you're going to appreciate his insight.
Coach Drew.
So, welcome, Dr. V, Dr. Vidoll Regisford. I'm so glad that you are able to join this conversation. And we are talking to our brothers, to the men today. We are talking about our emotions. So, tell me, what would you say is the biggest myth about men and our emotions?
I think the biggest myth is that we do not have the capacity to express our emotions.
We do not have the capacity to express our emotions. Tell me more about that.
I think the general idea about men is that we can be boorish, we are not necessarily as engaged, we don't listen well, we don't communicate well, we are not the kinds to express emotions that convey what the world or what the standard is about emotions, i.e. tears, or be reflective about our emotion. And I think that's inaccurate. I think what it is about men is that we do it differently.
So how do we do it?
I think men, when they're in the right state of mind and when the right situation, can express emotion, can express their thoughts and their feelings. They are adept at stating clearly what it is they want and what it is they don't want. And they grieve in relationships differently. It might not be in the form of tears, but it might be in the form of silent reflection or guarded isolation, if I can use that word. And so a man may step back and take time for himself. He may go to his man cave and just be present there.
So tell me something, because I ascribe to the reality that there are so many differences between not just men and women, but between men. But I definitely can say that I've seen that dynamic where more often than not, the men really want to pull back and they want to take time before engaging. Why is that important for us to understand about ourselves and for our counterparts to understand about us?
It's important for both men and women, is what I would say. It's always important before you respond or before you lash out to take a step back, breathe, think, reflect, review what it is that I want to say, and then think about packaging that message or that comment or that statement in a way that it will be received. Ideally, we all want to be heard, and we want what is shared to have had some impact, to have had some influence, to make some difference. When we're not patient with what it is that's coming through our minds and running through our thoughts and our hearts, it often ends up, yes, disastrously as men. And it's not what our intention is, but it's what the impact is, that it often creates hurt or distance or a perception of being angry. And this whole idea of anger being associated with men is something that men, generally speaking, are not comfortable with. We all can get angry, but it tends to be in our society this idea that men, when we think about anger, we think about men. We don't think about it as it relates to women. We don't see it as a man perhaps being more direct and more, let me say, he would more economize with his words, get to the point, state it matter of factly.
Right. As you talk about men and anger, I just remember growing up as a boy, and I was bullied a whole lot. So to be honest with you, I envied the strength that was shown in aggression. And I think we're praised as boys, as teens, for being strong and being not so much assertive as much as we are when we're aggressive. And I think that kind of sticks with us, at least the reputation, not so much the intention, but the reputation, I think, has stuck with men, where we see the expressions of aggression, whether it's in your face or in it's your tone, because that's what we're familiar with. But beneath that is a whole bunch of other stuff. It's not just anger. There's a lot of other emotions beneath the anger. Can you relate to that? Do you see that in your work with men?
Oh, absolutely. And if time isn't taken to unearth that, if we are always looking at the externalities of expressions, then we miss an opportunity. So it's easy to look at the anger, it's easy to look at the matter of fact statement, but it takes a whole lot more work to ask, what were you thinking? Why are you feeling the way you're feeling? Help me understand that. That's the beauty of the work that's required with men and in understanding men. It is that interrogative, that subtle statement or question that invites a conversation. Now, the expression might not be what the requester is looking for, but you'll find that there'll be more of an engagement because it's not as threatening. It's not as off-putting.
Not only can I relate to that, but I definitely see it in the work that I've done over the years. And even yesterday, I was meeting with a couple, and just the reality that what she was seeing in his face and hearing in his voice was not the whole story. And sometimes we don't look at ourselves. We don't know what our faces look like. We don't hear what our voices sound like. And I think that's part of the disconnect with men, because while we do have emotions and while they do fuel our actions, sometimes we're not as familiar with them. So we don't have this intimate knowing of ourselves and our emotions. So what we are feeling, we're not actually expressing. There's an incongruence. And sometimes it's helpful for people who are on the outside of us to say, okay, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm hearing. You look angry. Am I reading this right? And the intention here is not so much to make it the responsibility of the partner to manage the man's emotions, but it's more to get an accurate reading of what it is that the person is feeling and experiencing. And I think we're all at different growth points. And for some men, that is an area for growth, that they actually do benefit from having somebody from the outside, not so much critique or criticize them, but more so to inquire, to get more clarity about what's going on.
Most absolutely, most absolutely. And what you're talking about there is really self-awareness. Self-awareness, we're not born with that. It's not part of, our DNA. We learn to become self-aware. And again, with boys growing into young men, into manhood, into masculinity, it's not something that is often talked about or or we're trained. We have to, as a result of relationships, whether it be with an employer or whether it be with our friends or whether it be with a companion, we have to, and there's where we typically learn to become more self-aware when someone gives us feedback. So the conversation you and I are having is not just situated in male-female relationship, if I could use that, but it's also an employee-employee relationship. And that is, how do we learn to be more expressive and while at the same time be reflective? How do we learn to receive feedback from someone, and hopefully in a non-threatening way, in a way that is non-judgmental, that allows us to sit and review our actions so that we come to a place where our words and our behaviors are indeed congruent, that they synergize. Well, that takes a lot of growth, and that's building one's personal capacity for expression of emotions, feelings, and their thoughts. So it becomes part of your consciousness over a period of time. It becomes part of your DNA, and your emotional DNA, if I can say that, where we now think clearly, if I say this, this is what might happen. Is that what I want? Let me think about this. Perhaps if I go about it this way,
Right.
this might yield it.
So you're saying a whole lot, and I think sometimes we don't realize all of the parts and pieces that come together to enable us to communicate, to communicate well. That self-awareness you're talking about, that ability to reflect, the ability to express, to be congruent, that you called it, that synchronicity with ourselves, with our emotions, whether we're at work and we're at home. It is an area that will be at different degrees of growth throughout our lives, and when situations and traumas, trials, troubles, whatever you want to call it, happen, that can impair our ability to function in terms of effective communication.
Most absolutely. As you're speaking, I'm thinking about a conversation I had with a friend of mine yesterday around the the key areas of communication that really make us ineffective or impair our ability to build and strengthen relationships. And unfortunately, we live in a world where trust is at a premium. But while it's at a premium, it's as a result of people being hurt. And so when people are hurt, they're not as trusting. So what's required? I believe fundamentally for good, healthy relationship, there has to be a capacity for vulnerability. One has to develop a capacity to be vulnerable, to be naked with the other, and to be so transparent that they're able to say, this is who I am, this is where I'm at. Please accept me for who I am. But more importantly, I'm prepared to learn. I'm prepared to grow. If we don't create space for individuals to be vulnerable and vulnerable in a safe way, if we don't permit that in a non-judgmental way, the individual will close down. Communication will be strained at best.
Right. Now, vulnerability is not something we grow up looking for, um, because even that word, it suggests that you are there's weakness
Mhm.
in vulnerability, like you're exposing parts of yourself, risking in injury or hurt or harm. Those kinds of images come to mind for me when I hear the word vulnerability. So my question is to the men, let's start there. You're clearly highlighting that being naked with the other person, being honest, open, transparent, giving access is important. But the question is, how do you how do you go about doing that? If that's not something that you're used to, comfortable with, you might get it up here that that's important. But how do you do that?
Well, first let me say this, that our reptilian brain is such that we are naturally predisposed to protection, to being defensive. That's our nature. So when we anticipate hurt or harm, or if we've been hurt or harmed before, our natural instinct is, I'm going to go into protective mode because I don't know if this is going to be another event like this. And so what we do is we retreat and we retreat and we retreat. If we retreat far back enough, it becomes really difficult to be vulnerable, and it takes a lot of work. So vulnerability for me is really about creating the moment, the environment, and the conversation.
Mm,
And that is a letting down of the self. The person who wants to be vulnerable needs to know they're in a safe place to do that. They need to
Let me
hear.
ask you a question, because I when you talked about previous hurts, it obviously for me brings up the art of a genuine apology, because I think in so many ways and years of our lives, we've experienced hurts that haven't been addressed, and we haven't recovered. We haven't learned that we can heal, that we can endure, and that the hurts that we experience aren't things that we need to really actually be afraid of.
Mhm.
So tell me, what do you think about vulnerability, men, and apologies?
Well, there are two angles to it, or two dimensions to it. One is the capacity of the man, and I continue to use this word capacity because we are not necessarily all at that place where we've learned, grown, and we're fully competent in knowing ourselves and being ourselves. So the apology is one about the receiver of the apology and the capacity of that man to provide an apology that the receiver receives in a safe, open way and can then reciprocate in good communication, good relationship. The other is the man who himself needs to understand that the apology is necessary and how he receives an apology and then as a result of an apology reciprocates in relationship. I think what's key for me as I think about the work that I've done is when an individual hears an apology, naturally and instinctively, the guard begins to go down. They're naturally then in a place to hear and receive because it takes a lot to make an apology. An apology is the equivalent of the white flag. I'm waving it. Look, I'm throwing the towel in here. Okay, I've done something wrong. When that's done, for me, that's a sacred place. It is a place of honor.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a place of judgment because what I've seen and experienced is that one makes an apology and the other party believes that, oh, this is now a place of power for me. Well, why are you apologizing? Help me understand why. What do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? And then the inquisition continues on. Well, you can rest assured, if you thought it was hard for him to apologize before and to think that when he actually gets to that place of apology, of making an apology, you're going to engage in an inquisition, that he's going to apologize again, good luck.
Okay, let's pause. Let's pause for a moment, because you're highlighting on a number of things. Because number one, uh, the vulnerability is one of the core values woven into a genuine apology. So I definitely appreciate the connection that we're making here, especially as you give guidance and direction around the sacred safe place, and how to honor that vulnerability, especially when a man is attempting to apologize. I think it's relevant for both, um, but in our from our world and our reference point, our reference, men are less likely to apologize. So when that does come about, it's all the more important to be non-judgmental, right? To not turn it into an inquisition, right? To make that moment more grievous and onerous than it already is. Which is why when we're heading into it, it's important for whoever's offering the apology to observe that first step, because the clearer you are on being specific, labeling your specific actions, is the less room for questions.
Yes.
Right? So for those of you who aren't familiar with the art of a genuine apology, there are four steps that form the live formula. L is where you list the specific behaviors that you want to apologize for. I is where you imagine the impact that your actions have had on the other person. B, that's where you verbalize a commitment to a plan of action, like how you're going to do things differently. And then E, you extend an invitation. So you extend an invitation for feedback. So it becomes a dialogue. And I think when we observe that formula, that helps to not only be clear about what we're apologizing for, it helps to connect the heart so the person who's receiving the apology is less skeptical. There's more understanding because you're giving the context. Not only are you giving the context, you're restoring trust because you're saying, this is what I'm going to do differently. And then they don't need to jump in. They don't need to do the whole inquisition piece because you're actually going to extend that invitation for them. So it already does become a dialogue, right?
No, most absolutely. And not that I want to add to your book, but perhaps it's the second version of your book. Allow me to add the S in at the end of the E, and that is making it sustainable. So when you create a sustainable practice in your relationship, that this is how we manage conflict or differences or hurts or pain, we have programmed ourselves
Right.
and programmed our relationship that in order for this to be sustainable, we will go through this step, we'll go through this path. And that gives life to our relationship
Right.
rather than doing it once and that's it. And then we revert back to a natural and instinctive nature, which is to not apologize and to be yearning for an apology. And so it's critical to relationship. Again, I want to focus on this whole area of vulnerability for one moment. When we open that box, when we open that moment that I am going to be vulnerable, the expectation is a depth of respect and honor for that. That is the most sacred place a person can get to, and that is to say, I am weak, I am unsure, but here I am.
Mm-hmm.
The expectation on the other side is that you honor that. And by so doing, the other party who's being vulnerable sees the receptivity, sees the warmth, experiences the engagement, and now reciprocates back and forth. Relationships are not sustainable unless they're reciprocal. If there's always this imbalance, you will have an unhealthy state in your relationship. There has to be mutual reciprocity of the ingredients that make your relationship healthy. So if the male has practiced and demonstrated vulnerability, it would be a reasonable expectation that if there's a conflict the next time, he might want his partner to demonstrate that, and vice versa. So you do that enough, you see yourselves naked enough that it becomes natural, that you're not uncomfortable being and presenting yourself this way for the most minute of things or for the greater things. An apology becomes natural, a natural feature of your love language or your communication.
So what I'm hearing you talk about is cultivating an environment. And I think that is what not only we all want. I know that's what my mission is. My mission is to move forward into the world and to help shift and shape relationship cultures. So there is that dynamic where we understand this is how we become safe. This is how we become transparent. This is how we become well. This is how we learn, heal, and grow. I believe we can all do that. So as we bring this to a close, I want.
Bringing this to a close, this has been so good.
I know, but I don't want to. I'm trying to put a cap on it because you and I could talk about this stuff for days. But we'll probably come back to it again. But I want to know, what are you doing that's exciting you in your work these days, and how can people reach you?
Wow, that's a deep question, but an easy question to answer. All of what I do is exciting. There's never a dull moment. It keeps me stimulated. It keeps me engaged. It keeps me active, and it keeps me humble. Some of the work that I'm doing right now is really around men, and men who have gone through separation, divorce, men who are having issues around access to their children, creating an environment for them to speak, creating an environment for them to purge their experiences. Why is that important? Men who are in these environments are not only experiencing the loss in relationship, whether with the children or whether it be with a companion, but they're also dealing with a larger bureaucracy and a larger systemic system, let alone for men who are racialized and challenged linguistically or educationally. And there's very little to nothing out there. So men are wandering the desert of the courtrooms of this land, not knowing who to turn to or who to speak to about what they're experiencing in a system that seemingly or ostensibly is imbalanced. And so really engaging with men who are experiencing that loss and those hurts and helping them to navigate the system, but also to navigate the natural emotions that come through often what is a protracted period of time before resolution is achieved. So talking to them about their mental, emotional, physical, social health and wellness, the importance of having good networks of friends who are connected, their faith, and so on. That's the exciting work. That's the new work because it's work that isn't being done.
Wow. You know what? We are definitely going to come back to those pieces because this is, you're right. This is a very, very, very critical season for many men who are enduring the pain of that challenge, and facing the bureaucracy in the court systems, especially if you're racialized, right? So we'll definitely come back to that. And I look forward to the work that we're going to be doing. The Men's Mental Health Summit that we kicked off in early November. And we're going to be doing round 2 in January. So there'll be more information about that. But I know I'm going to be having a conversation with you in a couple of minutes or a couple of days. So you and I will talk soon. But thank you so much again for joining me.
My pleasure.
On this channel, and I look forward.
It has been a delight.
You bring so much to it, and I look forward to our next conversation. So thank you for joining us. As you heard, vulnerability is something that relationships require. Healthy relationships will experience vulnerability, and it's not always easy. So again, if you need some support with that and you need some encouragement, by all means, you can reach out to Dr. Vidoll or reach out to myself, and the contact information is below. Until we connect next time, continue to learn, heal, and grow.